In the spirit of reconciliation, Up Past Bedtime would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the incredible lands in which we record this podcast. By extension, we pay our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, their past and present elders, and the connection they have to Australia's land, sea, and community. Hello and welcome back to Up Past Bedtime. I'm Bella Messina and I am going to be staying up late with you tonight. Guys, this is going to be an interesting episode, okay? I've spent the whole morning/day crying on the phone to my divorce lawyer, and then I just finished eating a massive party-sized packet of Cheetos cheese and bacon balls. If you've gone through a divorce, you know the vibes, you know what I'm going through. And why am I back with the singing already on episode 2? Welcome back to episode 2 of our season of Her. If this is the first episode that you are deciding to join in on, please know that this season 3 of Up Past Bedtime is set up as a free online pod course. It's like an e-course, but on a podcast. And it is designed to be listened to from episode 1 through to episode 15. So stop here, head back to episode 1, listen to that, and then come back to this episode, okay? I promise it's the way it's designed and it is how you're going to get the most out of this season. I'm so excited to be back. I'm so happy. So many of you loved last week's episode. I had put so much time, effort, and thought into this whole season. So to see you guys really loving it and loving the Up Past Bedtime After Dark episode makes me so happy. So we're on to part 2 of the journey of getting back to the best versions of ourselves, rediscovering our her. And today's topic we are really going to be diving into is confidence and finding your true, authentic, cool girl energy. Okay. Now, today's episode is about confidence, but not the type of confidence that we are taught to strive for. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room or the best curated version of yourself that fits in. I want to talk about the confidence that comes from when you actually stop performing for others. This episode is for the women who have ever felt like they've had to shape-shift to be accepted. If you can't already guess from where I'm going with this, a lot of this episode is going to be going through my recent journey of being diagnosed neurodivergent and how unmasking and stepping into my unmasking journey has really changed the way that I show up in the world. This episode is really about how my definition of confidence has truly transformed. Now, whether you're neurodivergent or not, the pressure on women to please, perform, and be palatable is something pretty much all of us carry. I would be shocked if you didn't as a woman. So this episode is going to be your permission slip to drop the act and reconnect with the version of you that is waiting to be seen. Welcome to season 3 of Up Past Bedtime with me, Bella Messina. This season, we're doing something different. Something special. This is going to be a true exploration of womanhood, of reconnecting to who I am and who I want to be. We're diving deep into my journey of rediscovery and growth as I navigate motherhood, healing, and everything in between. This season, I'm inviting you to come along with me because maybe you're finding your way back to yourself too. This is our season to rediscover her. Think of this as our late night heart to heart where nothing is off limits. Because as always, the best conversations happen when you're up past bedtime. So yes, this episode I really am going to be discussing a lot of my personal journey with being diagnosed ADHD, being diagnosed ASD, having postpartum depression, and all round just being a chronic people pleaser to the point that it was so detrimental to me that it truly ruined my entire life. I people pleased to a fault so much that I ended up building a life that I was so deeply unhappy with, but I didn't even have skills to let people know that I was unhappy with the amount of people pleasing I was doing because I couldn't figure out how to not people please anymore. It was very confronting and very hard. And that has been the biggest part of my unmasking journey after being diagnosed neurodivergent, is trying to let go of people pleasing. I was actually in a therapy session earlier this morning. And one thing my therapist and I were really discussing is how for most of my life, I had this deep rooted belief that unconditional love was not real, that I could not be loved unconditionally. And unless I was performing and being perfect, I had no value and therefore no one would love me. Very deep, heavy stuff, but it pops up in deep ways and very superficial, little tiny, everyday habit ways that can really transform your life. And if you are so obsessed with pleasing everyone else all the time, you can't ever have the energy to please yourself, and therefore you will never get to reach the best version of yourself. Unfortunately, it is human nature not to be liked by everyone. And a lot of us people please as a defense mechanism, okay? We think that if we make everyone else around us happy, no bad things can happen, no one can not love us, no one can do mean things to us, bad things can't happen because we're meeting everyone's checklists and we're making everyone happy. But that is not the reality. And I think what I sort of realized is like I had been on this journey of pleasing everyone all the time and my life still fell apart. And I kind of got to like the rock bottom of it and was like, oh my God, I just wasted so much time being this like perfect person for everyone else. I've still ended up in the worst position and I'm so deeply unhappy. And that was sort of like the mind switch version for me, where I was like, okay, I need to like dig deep and find the confidence to be who I really am. Now, I don't want it to get confused. I have always been a confident person, okay? But I have learned over time that my confidence was a really big form of masking for me. So I've always been someone who has been very extroverted, usually a very big personality in the room. I like to joke around. I like to be loud and funny. I've never really been scared of giving an opinion, but I used to only do it if I thought the opinion I was going to give was going to make someone like me more. If I didn't think my opinion lined up with them, I would usually like keep it within myself. My friends often kind of centered me in that role and that personality. You know, Bella's really outgoing. Bella's really good in social situations. One thing I've never had is social anxiety. I've had lots of other anxiety. Social anxiety is not one of them. But I actually had to do a big reflection recently and be like, was that actually who I am? And was that authentic, or was part of that performance? A big thing with women who are neurodivergent is they will often put on a front of being very confident, very strong, very outgoing to try and blend in with others, when in reality, it is not always the case. I have learned over time that I am a true extrovert, but there was a while there where I was like, am I actually an extrovert, or have I just told myself I have to be an extrovert for other people to like me? Because the quiet introverted role is not always the one that people are drawn to. It is not the most popular. It is not the most palatable of women. So I was like, am I actually extroverted, or was I told that I couldn't be introverted, if that makes sense? But I am pretty confident I am extroverted because I do get revitalized and energized from being around people. I don't mind having a little bit of time by myself, but it's not my preference. I put a lot of pressure on myself in my late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, truly 12 months ago, of being the most liked person. I wanted to be impressive. I wanted to be wanted. I wanted to be this version of myself that was really confident, but also edited, okay? And I found that being outwardly confident was like a really good way for me to edit myself into who I wanted others to perceive me as. A little bit of like fake it till you make it. But the problem was I just kept faking, and I didn't really ever make it because, well, you can't be something that you're not, you know? And that kind of led into what I call the Great Depression of my life. And that is what happened after I had my second child. Because the thing is with me, and when it came to my false confidence and my masking, is motherhood cracked it all open. Okay. It obliterated it open. So after I had my second daughter, Benny, I ended up being diagnosed with really bad postpartum depression. I did not get postpartum depression with my oldest, Rosie. And to be honest, I didn't really feel like I got postpartum depression with Benny until a little bit into my postpartum journey. Maybe 5 or 6 months into the journey was when I started to be like, ooh, I'm actually really sad and quite depressed. And at first I thought that was weird. And I was like, I thought postpartum depression was something you kind of got like instantly after having a kid. But I have actually been told that it is very common for it to be like late onset. And that is because we can kind of go into survival mode. And so your body is running off like adrenaline and, all the other hormones that come out during fight or flight for the first couple of months, or is sometimes even up to the first 12 months after having a baby. And then when your body sort of burns out, you can have like this big collapse and end up with postpartum depression. At first, I was in huge denial that I had postpartum depression because I did not have a complicated postpartum with Benny. She was an awesome breastfeeder. She was an okay baby. She's never been a very good sleeper, but compared to what I went through with Rosie's introduction to the world, Benny was a breeze, okay? So I was like, there's no way I can be depressed because I don't have anything to be depressed about. Like, this baby is nowhere near as hard as my first baby. I'm also more of a seasoned mother now, so I should be more confident, more capable at completing things. I had been a mum and a stay-at-home mum for quite a while, so I was very confused at first as to like, why am I feeling so sad and down and overwhelmed? I shouldn't be feeling this way. And a really funny thing that I have learned, well, it's not funny, it's sad, but I say funny, I don't know, in a jovial way, about postpartum depression is postpartum depression is actually a very common indicator of undiagnosed neurodivergence in women. So motherhood is a very unique part of life where a lot of women find that all the coping mechanisms and masking skills they had learned throughout their life to hide their neurodivergence become unmanageable and something that we cannot keep up in motherhood because motherhood is so taxing on you, okay? So when you have a baby, you then start not only being responsible for yourself and all the things that you have to do and all the things that you have to uphold, but you also become responsible for doing that for another whole human. So you fully look after them, think about them, feed them, dress them, do everything, okay? They are literally little blobs that can't do anything for themselves and they are 100% dependent on you in every single aspect, shape, and form, okay? So usually when you have a baby, the time and energy that you were using to do your skills to get through life with an undiagnosed neurodivergent brain and to mask and to fit in and for people to not notice that you're a little bit different, that energy gets used for a baby, or in my case, at this point, it was getting used for 2 babies, and I could no longer do all the masking and coping mechanisms I had learnt in the past. The big amounts of energy that I used to do that got spent on my kids and there was nothing left. And then I went into what is like clinically known as neurodivergent burnout, okay? And that is where your body and your brain can no longer function and do all the things it needed to do to function, and it just like pretty much goes kaput and you kind of go into like a freeze mode or a shutdown mode. All right. And this is what my postpartum depression was in a nutshell. Okay. People always ask me, they're like, oh, what led to you, seeking your ADHD diagnosis or seeking your ASD diagnosis? And honestly, I had put myself on a wait list for an ADHD diagnosis before having Benny because of something that a therapist had said to me, but I wasn't very committed to it. It was kind of something where I was like, okay, I guess I'll like try this. I'll go on the wait list and I'll see if I need it. Okay. And then when I got really bad postpartum depression and I started getting perinatal therapy, I really got pushed towards a diagnosis for both ADHD and ASD from that therapist, who she was the one that kind of was like, I think you are both ADHD and ASD, and I think you have been doing extreme masking your whole life to become across very neurotypical, very much like the poster girl of having it all together and being okay. And you are in a state right now of extreme burnout, and we need to get you diagnosed and you start learning skills to take a lot of the pressure off your plate. When you go through the neurodivergent testing process, they do like a bunch of different testings on you, okay? And one of the testings I had to do, I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, but one of the testings I had to do was on masking, and it like was a sort of this questionnaire sort of thing that like tested how good you were at masking or how much masking you might have been displaying in your life. And it was like, I can't remember the exact figures now, to be honest, but it was something like the top score that you could get on this to say like, oh, they're masking to like expert level, X game level masking was like, I don't know, say it was like 170 or something. I think it was something like that. I was like, my score that I got back was like 150. And like a normal neurotypical person on that scale should get like 30 or something. Like, because everyone does a little bit of masking to try and fit in. That's just like human nature. We all want to be accepted and liked. But people who are neurotypical usually don't have to try so hard because they meet like the societal norms. And so they don't need to change too much about themselves for people to like them, right? And then, yeah, mine was saying I was like 157. And my therapist was like, you are like an intense masker. She's like, there is no wonder to me that you have severe postpartum depression and you are so burnt out and at your wit's end. Because she was like, you must be exhausted every day because this test is telling me that you do so much to hide so much about you. And that was really confronting to me because, like I said, I'd always thought I had been a really confident person. And also a lot of the things that turned out to be masking, I didn't even know were not normal or masking. Like, for example, I still remember this because my therapist was like, you didn't think that was weird? And I was like, no, I thought everyone did that. So one of the questions on one of the ASD screenings was, do you ever practice facial expressions or ways that you hold and conduct yourself in social situations in the mirror? And I was like, yes, all the time. Like, I was saying to my therapist, I remember when I was a teenager and I was going on my first date, the night before I probably spent an hour or two in front of the mirror practicing how I was going to hold my face when, you know, they said certain things, how I was going to hold my face when they went in for a kiss, how I was going to, I don't know, hold their hand and what that would look like standing next to them, holding their hand, and like, how should I position my body when like they want to do something? Like, I would spend hours and hours and hours in front of the mirror doing that, practicing all these different scenarios and social settings. And I would like practice ways that I should hold my face and move my body in order for it to look normal and okay. And so people wouldn't be like, oh my God, she's a freak. And like she, I don't know, moves really weird and acts really weird. And I thought that was really normal. Like, I genuinely said to my therapist, doesn't everybody do that? Like, doesn't everyone practice their facial expressions and body movements in the mirror? She was like, no, they don't actually. They just do them in the moment and they don't really think about them that much. She was like, the fact that you think about it that much is not normal. I didn't know it wasn't normal to practice the amount of eye contact you're meant to hold with people during certain settings and situations. I didn't know that it was normal to really like plan out every single tiny little social situation and how I should talk and, you know, have pre-chosen responses and jokes and things in my mind. I didn't know that it wasn't normal to sit down and have the lyrics up of every single like popular song in the top 20 billboards in my teen years and learn the lyrics and the song back to front, even though I didn't really like, even if I didn't like the song or whatever, so that when I was in social situations, I could sing along with everyone else who clearly liked, you know, this song and whatever as much as I did. I didn't really understand special interests and how they could really look like anyway. I was just really had like intense masking coping mechanisms. Like other things, like when it came to ADHD and like, being like my time management was really dependent on like really long-winded routines and ways that I would like get myself to places on time or get ready for things. The problem is when you are a mother, especially a mother with really young babies, you don't have, 3 or 4 hours to prepare for a doctor's appointment or something like that, which genuinely I would go through big, long routines to be able to get somewhere. And so, of course, I then, started not being able to get anywhere. I wasn't able to dress myself like I usually did. I wasn't able to do any of the usual things that I used to do to try and get from A to B. And then, I was really unorganized. My life started falling apart. I didn't have the energy to, clean my home. I couldn't cook. I got really depressed. I couldn't get out of bed. Put on a lot of weight. I didn't realize a really big thing of neurodivergence was food aversions, a history of eating disorder. So I had quite a severe eating disorder in high school. I had anorexia. I didn't realize like binge eating, food noise, loving like junk food is actually a really big thing of being neurodivergent because of the consistency of the food. So like a fun fact, a lot of people with ADHD or autism love McDonald's, and that's because no matter where you go in the world, no matter at what time, you know what your meal is going to taste like. There is very little variance in the taste of the food, and that is very comforting for us, and that is why a lot of us love McDonald's, and it's a big safe food for us. If anyone knows me personally, you would know like I love McDonald's. I've always loved McDonald's my entire life, and I didn't understand why that was the case, and I didn't understand why I loved like packeted chips or like things that came in a packet or weren't the most healthy. I was really drawn to because the taste of them was consistent and I knew I could depend on them. The texture was consistent. Like you got to think of it this way, like a banana, right? Depending on what time in the life cycle of the banana you eat it, you're going to get a different experience in texture, in taste, That doesn't happen with like processed foods or packaged foods or whatever. Like this is what it's going to taste like whether I open up this packet today or I open it up next week. And I used to carry a lot of guilt with that because I used to think like, oh, my diet's really unhealthy and why don't I just like healthy food like other people? And then that caused a lot of restrictive eating for me because I wanted to be thin because that's a very common thing of masking too, is wanting to be lean and thin because unfortunately there's a societal perception that if you are lean and thin, you are more palatable and you fit in more. So that was another really big thing that I didn't realize about being undiagnosed neurodivergent is like there's a reason why I've always had issues with food. Sometimes when I reflect on my childhood, I'm like, how the heck did you guys not notice this sooner? But yes, masking is also a really common thing of why people sometimes think people who are neurodivergent aren't. And it's not because we are not like we're making it up. It's usually just because we are much more developed at masking. Women in general are much better at shaping themselves to fit in. And so naturally then neurodivergent women are also higher maskers, and that's usually why men are diagnosed a lot sooner than women. They don't feel that societal pressure to fit in as much as women do, and so their symptoms of their neurodivergence comes out a lot sooner. But yes, women tend to internalize everything. So the problem with this is I had always put myself down as someone who was really confident, as someone who was really outgoing, as someone, who was very extroverted, very fun, had lots of friends, was very much like a chameleon shape-shifted type of girl. Like I had friendship groups in all different sections and all different interests and met them from all different walks of life. And then when I got diagnosed and I started to go through the unmasking process, I went through like a really big sort of identity crisis because I then started to be like, what parts of this is actually me? And like what parts of me am I actually, a confident, outgoing person? And what part of this is just masking? And that was really confronting to go through because I started to learn that confidence is a really big key to success and to making your way through life. It's very hard to do things if you're not confident in the person that you are. And unfortunately, unmasking is not just a switch where it's like, okay, I don't want to mask anymore, I'm going to turn it off. It's really hard to unlearn. It's a very confronting journey. Lots of people go through very big mental health challenges when they go through the neurodivergent unmasking process. And so I had this sort of dilemma after my marriage fell apart. I was at my lowest. I've then, trying to go through the unmasking process. And I just kind of realized that confidence at a whole just disappeared from my life for a little bit. That was really confusing and is why I've chosen this as step 2 of this journey of me talking about what I think is needed to find the most authentic version of yourself. And going back through what I have done in the last couple of months is like a lot of my journey came down to rediscovering my confidence in myself. And that didn't necessarily mean the confident that I was before this all happened, just the confidence to be who I wanted to be. I think the thing is I didn't just suddenly become autistic or become ADHD. I was always that. It was always going on for me. That is something you were born with. But I just started to understand that maybe the way I had always felt was not really who I was. And that was confusing. I think it's really obvious that I have had a big change in the way that I present myself and the way that I show up in the world, purely from the comments I get from people like, you are so different now. You have such a different energy about you. You have such a different light. This is I love this version of you, this new version of you. And that really comes down to me trying to let go of what I wanted to be perceived as, and just move forward with accepting who I was, okay? I was really obsessed in the past with always having this projection of myself that I was capable, I was calm, I was cool, I was confident, I was maternal, I was kind, I was happy. I wanted to be this perfect girl, right? And I wanted to have this kind of attitude and energy about me that people would get that. And, when I started getting postpartum depression and it all sort of fell apart, I feel like I got even more depressed because that was definitely not the perception I was giving off to people. I was giving off unhappy, lost, confused, sad. I was just a hot mess, okay? And that really fucked with my brain and really was hard for me because I started to see the gap with how I felt on the inside and how people perceived me get really close together, okay? I used to really pride myself on that gap being really far away, and pretty much they started touching. There was no gap, okay? How I felt on the inside, very confused, very unsure of myself, very just a mess, was what I started projecting into the world, okay? I no longer had this really strong facade that I had it all together and everything was okay. And I know a lot of women start to feel this way after becoming a mum. You have that thing where you're like, who am I anymore? I used to be the person that did all these things and, I don't understand where all my time's gone. I used to be able to do this and that, and now I can't do any of it and I don't know what's going on and I don't know who I am. And that's very common, all right, for us all to experience, whether you are neurodivergent or not. Sometimes women go through this when they leave high school or when they leave a relationship. You have these moments where you're like, wow, I've had this huge life change and now I'm feeling very lost on what I thought I was as a person and what I was projecting and what I'm actually feeling on the inside. I like to call it my confidence journey, not just my unmasking journey, my journey back into, or actually I would say for the first time, not back, the first time into feeling really content with the person that I truly am and not just the person I want people to think I am, was I had to fully let go of the curated version of Bella that I had spent my entire life putting out. I'm not saying this was just a version of me that I put out online. I put this version out everywhere to everyone, okay? Unless you were very, 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 very close to me, the version that I was working so hard to keep out, that was the version I was giving to everyone, okay? I wanted to make people happy. I wanted to make people like me. I had this real goal in life that I was this, really nice, happy, go lucky sort of girl. I would spend so much time on this, and it was really confronting to me to be like, okay, to actually be a happier, healthy, authentic version of me, I have to let go of that. And how can I do that when my entire identity is rooted in that version of me and my entire life is built on that version of me and everyone knows me as that version of me? How am I meant to let that go now? Because that kind of leaves me, what I felt like, with nothing. And that is the big dilemma that I feel like a lot of women go through, where we're kind of like, okay, I don't want to just be people pleasing all the time. I don't want to be this version of myself that everyone else wants me to be. And I don't want to go through this anymore. But what am I left with if I decide that? And that is the magic question. Okay. And that is why this journey can be so hard and so transformative. You are pushed back to what feels like the start line in life, and you've got to rediscover a lot about yourself all again. Now, I had the benefit of doing that single, which I actually believe made it a lot easier for me because I didn't have anyone else or anyone else's perception of me or anyone else's feelings of me to consider when I was going through that journey, okay? I was just had me and my kids, but I feel like the beauty with children is they really do show you that unconditional love is a thing. And, they don't really care about, you doing societal things to be liked more. Like they like you most of the time, regardless of if you laugh at the right times or if you like doing the same things as everyone else or if you like dressing the same way as everyone else. Like, the kids don't really care about that stuff that much. Like, that's a really cool thing about little kids is like, I feel like unmasking with kids is something that's actually quite easy to do. And that was an energy I lent into. It isn't an easy thing to find a real confidence in yourself to be like, I'm going to be who I want to be. I had to have a sit down with myself and be like, okay, with my content, I don't want to be polished anymore. I don't want to be palatable anymore. I don't want to be liked by everyone anymore. I don't want to have to say yes all the time anymore. I don't want to have to politely respond to people who are rude to me in comment sections. I don't want to have to be polite to people in real life who are rude to me. I really just decided I don't want polished, I want honest. All right. And that's where I really started to anchor a lot of the decisions I made moving forward. And that was do what you feel like is honest. I'm not saying like throw away all societal norms and just like be brutally honest to the point of like, I don't know, you destroying people's feelings and being an asshole. I mean, like, I just started to be like, okay, stop trying to be liked as the, number one goal and pop the number one goal as let's try and be honest and let's try and be real and let's try and be authentic and vulnerable. So that was the mindset shift that I made. And I started doing things like, instead of dressing for just perception, I started dressing, for things that I liked, in colors that I liked, or I dressed for comfort instead of beauty. I started saying no and honoring my no and sitting in my no, even if it was uncomfortable. I started realizing I didn't have to say yes. As Kelly would say, if you've listened to Kelly's episode from last season, I decided when was okay to open and say yes and when it was okay to close and say no. I feel like saying no is a really big thing for women that we are not told to honor. Little girls are never really backed up for their no. We are always told to say yes, to be polite, to be nice, even things as simple as if you're at the playground and maybe you're playing with your bike or something and your parent is there and another kid comes up with their parent and the mother says, oh, my daughter really wants to have a go at their bike. How many times have you had your parents go, oh yes, Isabella, share your bike with the little girl. And you're standing there thinking, well, no, I don't want to do that. I'm playing with my bike. Why do I have to share my bike with this absolute complete stranger? And, you've been forced into sharing something. Like, that's a really basic level, but that is a very common thing, not just girls, but I feel like there is more pressure on girls to not say no, to always be nice and agreeable and say yes. I started leaning into crying online. That was one thing I often really avoided. I hated showing emotion in general. So crying online was really confronting to me. Crying in my real life in front of people was really uncomfortable to me. I actually learned that I was an expert at emotional suppression, which was a result of my ASD. I don't like to feel emotions that are challenging or negative. I kind of like to be able to pop everything into a little tiny box, and I would rather not express anything than express negative emotions or complex emotions. So a big thing I had to start doing was leaning into that, i.e. if I feel sad, I'm going to sit at home and cry, and I'm not going to go out and pretend to be happy-go-lucky with my friends. Or if I was angry, I was going to let someone know I was actually angry instead of internalizing everything, which was a really massive thing that I did. I also started doing things of like recognizing when I needed space, putting up boundaries. I'd never, ever made boundaries. I kind of let everyone walk all over every single boundary in my life. I started working with my therapist in getting steps on learning how to hold boundaries. That is still one of the hardest things for me, is saying no and holding boundaries. My default is to go back to people pleasing and serving, especially if it's someone I really care about or love. But I actually found the easiest place to start doing some of these no's and boundaries was online with strangers I didn't know. I found it a lot easier to do that with them than people in my life that I actually genuinely loved and cared about and knew deeply, and they knew me. This, of course, is something that has been done over months and months and months. It's not just something that you do overnight, and it's definitely not something that I am an expert at. Now, I don't want you listening to this and being like, well, what if I'm not neurodivergent? What if I don't mask? What if I know I don't have ASD or ADHD? Which is very fair. Actually, majority of you are probably listening to this thinking that. Masking at its core is not something that's uncommon for women, okay? We're all masking at something. Women are taught to people please. It's a survival strategy for a lot of women. How many times when you're in a, dangerous situation or a situation where you feel uncomfortable, will you start being agreeable or people please, right? Like, we don't have brute strength. So it's something that our brain naturally does to keep us safe. It's also very common for women to be chameleons in, friend groups, romantic relationships, workplaces, online. We are all told on some level to change the way we are to be liked by people. Like, there is $1 billion beauty industry that is made up on us all masking to some level, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical. Smiling when we're uncomfortable. Lots of women do that. I do that. What about when you're in a romantic relationship and you like to be perceived as low maintenance, because that is perceived as, being more attractive to men, apologizing for taking up space, for existing. I think it's a really interesting thing to reflect on, of when you are in a situation when you want to be liked, who do you become? What is the mask you put on straight away, and how much of that feels authentic to who you really are? And then to go beyond that, one question I started asking myself when everything fell apart was, what parts of me do I feel unsafe or uncomfortable expressing? I found a really big part of me that I found really unsafe to express to other people, show online, show in my real life, is anything that made me think that people would perceive me as being a bitch. Okay, so if I showed anything that showed me having a little bit of like spice to me, a little bit of kickback to me, a little bit of bite to me, anything that made me not just be seen as like the ultimate nice person, I hated that. I found it really uncomfortable. I hated the idea that someone would perceive me as a bitch, which is so silly because there's nothing wrong with being a woman that, has strong boundaries, has strong perceptions. Even if you are a bitch, who cares? Be a bitch. Well, it's not really going to affect that many people. Like, you be whoever you want to be. But I was so so adverse to anyone seeing any type of like anger, grumpiness, bitiness to me. Like if anyone perceived me as doing the wrong thing or doing something that was like even slightly immoral, like if I was being petulant or like, you know, having an emotion or having a little like adult tanty about something, if anyone like perceived that, I'd be so embarrassed about it when it's like normal. Everyone has emotional dysregulation, even as an adult. Like I hated that. And it was really hard to go, okay, well, why don't you lean into some of those things that you feel ashamed to let people see about you? Like another thing was like things that I was really interested in. I used to always think was really embarrassing to show people that I had an interest in anything. I think that was like a safety sort of mechanism, that if people didn't know that you liked something, people couldn't critique it, people couldn't make you feel silly about it. So I would come across very one-dimensional to people because I'd get very embarrassed at being like, oh my God, I'm trying to think of like an interest that I was like, oh, that's silly if I say that I like really love that. But like, I don't know, whatever it was, like I'd hate people thinking I actually liked something. And the biggest thing that I found myself sitting down, I genuinely sat down and I had a piece of paper in front of me and I put at the top of the page, who would you be or what would you do if you didn't care about how you were perceived? And I went down and listed off a whole bunch of things that I wish I could have done or wish I could have been if I didn't care about what people thought about me. And this was like pages and pages long. Like I realized there was so much about me that I was like, if I didn't care about the idea of being liked by everyone, I would say to this person that I didn't want to come to their birthday party. And I would say I would stop wearing, you know, this type of clothing.
I actually had that on my list. I would stop wearing Spanx if I didn't care about how people saw my tummy.
This is Current Time, Bella. I'm just jumping in here to let you know that there has been a corruption of my audio file. And so you would have just noticed then a massive decrease in audio clarity and audio quality. For the next 8 minutes, I have tried to fix the audio as best I can, but I didn't want to edit this part out and just delete the part of the conversation altogether because I think I have some really cool steps that you can actually implicate today. So I just implore you, listen for the next 8 minutes, endure the bad audio quality because the content is worth it.
Right? Like, it didn't have to be deep things. There were some things of like, I would go and pursue this, or I would go and, you know, live here, or I would go and hang out with this person if I didn't care about X, Y, and Z. They were like really like superficial ones. Like I would stop wearing Spanx if I didn't care as much about how I was perceived. And I went through and I kind of did an audit on some of them. And I was like, what are some of the easiest ones on this list that I can go through and do? I.e., I went and threw out every pair of Spanx I owned. I just started saying, like, I want to say no once a day. I want to say no once a day because I had just gotten so exhausted of saying yes to everything. I want to post a video about this once a week, you know, a topic that I never shared about online. I was too scared about to share online. I want to stop hanging out with this person because they make me feel crappy about myself. Like I started doing those type of things as a first step of like, okay, who am I when I'm trying to become liked? Who do I not want to be? Or who do I feel unsafe being when I try to be liked? Who would I be if I didn't care about being liked? They were like the 3 big questions I started asking myself. I wrote down my list and then I started really slowly over time implementing them. And the biggest thing I started reminding myself at the very start of this process, after I did those 3 questions, I wrote my list, was the version you're about to become might not be liked by everyone, but she will be liked by you. And that was the real key difference for me, is I had really lost sight of the idea of being a person that I liked. I was so obsessed with the idea of being someone that everyone else liked that I didn't even make any type of time to think about who I liked or who I wanted to be or a version of myself that was palatable to myself. Like I didn't care about that. I didn't spend any time thinking about it. Like I was so low on the priority list. And so I kept saying to myself, the only person that I have to be liked by, and put my head down on the pillow with, at the end of the day, is me, right? And I really realized that when my marriage fell apart, okay? Because I was like, I don't have anyone else now. I just have me. I just have little old me, and the little old me I have, I don't even like. I don't like her. I don't want to be around her. I don't think she's fun. I don't think she's cool. I don't want to be her friend. I don't think there's anything special or outstanding about her. I just think she is this carbon copy robot of a person that she thinks everyone else wants her to be. And that shook me to my core. To sit there and be like, I have no one and I don't even like the person I am. I'm sad to think there is probably going to be a lot of people listening to this right now who would probably be like, yeah, that's me. And it's a really scary truth to come face to face with. Wow, I don't like the person I am. I don't feel a connection to the person I am. I don't feel like there's anything authentic or genuine to the person I am. And I have spent so much time making other people happy, and at the end of the day, those people can go. You know, sometimes by choice, sometimes not by choice. You can't keep everyone in your life forever. The only person that you're truly with every single day, day in, day out, is yourself. And once I realized that being liked by myself is the most important bit, and that people will like me more when I like myself, it really changed the entire way that I move through the world. And I really think a testament to that is if you watch my content from, say, the start of 2024, and then you watch my content now, they are two completely different women. Now, I would ask you, which one do you like more? I'm going to say, unless people are just being a little like trolls and difficult, I like the old you more. I would say 95% of you are going to say the you now looks so much happier, looks so much more relaxed, is so much more authentic, seems more fun, seems more comfortable. Like, there's so much to say in being genuine to yourself and leaning into the version of you that makes you happy, because it makes you show up as just such a better person and a happier person. It's scary as fuck at first, okay? And the hard part of it is you might find a lot of relationships in your life change. And I'm going to talk about this in a future episode. But when you stop being the version of yourself that people know you as, and the version that you show up to make everyone else happy as, can be confronting, okay? And it can mean that a lot of the relationships in your life shift. I'm not talking just romantic. I mean all of the relationships in your life can shift. But I promise you that hard work is worth the reward, and that there is so much happiness and peace in being someone that makes you happy and that you truly like. Old Bella was confident because she felt like she had to be. New Bella is confident because she's done pretending and she doesn't have to hide anymore. It's like, I can show up as me, so I don't have to pretend to be anything anymore. I can just be me. And I think I realized, like, I lost everything being the person I wanted everyone else to be, and I survived it, and life moved on. Like, I can be the version of myself that I want to be, that makes me happy, and if everything falls apart and falls away, well, I survived it once, I can survive it again. At least this time I'm surviving it because I did something on my own terms. I feel like the biggest reframing is that confidence is a form of self-trust, right? You can be confident when you trust in who you are and who you're showing up as. And because of all of that, I am now okay with being misunderstood. I'm okay with sometimes being quiet, or sometimes being rude, or sometimes being emotional, or sometimes being too much. Because I know down to my core that I am not that person. Now, you might be listening to this episode and you're thinking, wow, Bella, that sounds really amazing now that you're 8 months through the process, but I'm not 8 months through the process. I'm 2024 you, okay? I'm January 2024 you, and I'm sitting there thinking, I hate everything about my life. I people please to a detriment. I'm super unhappy. I don't know how to, get rid of the things in my life I want to say no to and start saying yes to the things I want to say yes to. What do you mean? How do I get there? How do I do it? What was your first step? Let's do for your homework for this week. I told you guys you'd be getting homework. At the end of every episode, I would be giving you little tasks that I wanted you to take home and do, okay? So this week's reflection prompt that I want you to truly ask yourself, write it down on a piece of paper, stick it to the mirror, stick it on your desk, I don't know, pop it on your baby's above your baby's change table, put it in your wallet, put it on your home lock screen. The question and reflection is, Where am I performing in my life? And what would it look like if I stopped? And I remember my therapist saying this to me at the start of my journey, is I was like, well, I have to do this. And she goes, why? I said, well, I can't just give up. And she goes, well, what would it look like if you did give up? I said, I don't know. I don't think about that. She says, why not? I said, well, it's scary. And I want you to also do some reflection or even some journaling. Journaling would be really great on this if you're a journaler. You could do some voice notes to yourself about this. You could, I don't know, you don't even have to write anything down. You can, clip this part of the episode and go sit outside on your lawn on Saturday and sit in the sun and just have a think in your own brain about these questions. Okay? So the questions are, what version of myself do I project, especially to friends, at work, or in motherhood? What version of myself do I project? Does this feel authentic to me? If you're saying, yeah, I feel like the person I put out to everyone is really who I am, flag queen. Love that for you. That was not me, 12 months ago. Second thing, what parts of me feel unsafe or too much to share with others? What parts of me feel unsafe or too much to share? These are all the questions I was asking myself. Who do I become when I want to be liked? What would it look like to let go of that version, even just 5%?
Now, reflection is great, but I wanted to start doing something actionable in my life so that I could make changes to the things that I reflected on, and I could start actionably stepping towards letting go of my people pleasing. That was doing one small thing a week that feels more real than it does curated. One thing of the week. And it doesn't have to be something big. You could say no to something. Maybe that's saying no to a social event you don't want to go to, saying no to get up and grab your partner a drink when you're watching a movie. I don't know. Just say no to something and just allow yourself to say no. Maybe wearing something that feels good rather than looks trendy. Wear something that feels fun rather than looks trendy. Let yourself cry. Let yourself rest. Let yourself ramble. Talk about something with no limitation on it that you're passionate about. Sleep in. Leave the clean basket of clothes on the table and watch TV at night instead. Don't fold them. Don't wipe down a kitchen bench. Just leave it for one night. Just leave it and rest. See what happens. Post something on social media without overthinking it. Share something. Repost something on TikTok. We can really take it down a notch. Repost something without overthinking it. If you like it, repost it. See how it makes you feel. All right? Start with one thing a week. And if you get to the end of the week and you're like, I actually liked that, do it again the next week. Then maybe the week after that, do 2 things. I promise you that sounds so simple and you're like, that's not going to get me anywhere. That's how I started. That is how I started. I started doing one thing. And every time I tell myself, oh, you can't do that, I would stop and go, why not? Don't think about it, just do it. Because there is no real reason for why not, Isabella, just do it. That was the conversation I would have in my head. And then slowly over time, I found myself feeling really good doing those things, feeling really confident doing those things, feeling really happy doing those things. And it's become easier and easier and easier as the months go on. Remember, the purpose of this is we want to feel real and not curated. That is your homework for this week. If you do it, if you have any thoughts on it, if you feel any certain way about anything I've shared, please feel free to contact me about it. Share about it on your own social medias and tag me, DM me, reply to the comments. If you listen on Spotify, like you can comment on podcasts on Spotify, feel free to comment. I would love to hear how you found the episode. If you do the reflections, if you do the challenge, how did you go with them? Please let me know. Next week is a really exciting week. We have our first guest that's going to be on, and I think she's going to share some really cool and fun and interesting things with you all. And I think you're really going to enjoy her insight. So I'm so looking forward to that. And I have loved staying up late with you and chatting. I'm going to love you. I'm going to leave you. Sweet dreams.